Hi, good morning, everyone. New Yorkers, I just want to say I hope everyone in New York is safe after the flooding last night. And
New Jersey
yeah,
too.
New Jersey too, yeah.
Thank you. So hopefully everyone made it to higher ground and is okay. Welcome to the Valiant live stream. We're happy you're here. Thank you, regular viewers, for being here. We are a managed IT service provider, but we have a national, in New York City, but we have a national reach. And if you want to learn more about us, if you like what you see today, please check out our YouTube channel, and you can join the conversation by commenting on the YouTube videos. We really, really enjoy answering questions and finding new topics to do, driven by what people who watch our program want to see. So our topic today is one that I know George and Justin, you guys are super passionate about. It's designing healthy computing environments.
That is our topic of the day, but there was something I want to discuss first because I think it's incredibly important.
Oh, sorry.
George is looking at me like he has no clue what I'm going to talk about, but
it could be. I think I know what it is.
Surprise.
Every now and then,
I might know.
Every now and then, there's something you see in the news, and there's a lot of things in the news that aren't exactly the most cheerful or positive these days. But you see something, and it just warms your heart a little bit. And yesterday, news hit that the FTC is kind of getting a bit aggressive with McDonald's on the operating state of their ice cream machines. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't want them to ever work. And I mean, this is literally happening right now. They're reaching out being like, folks, what's going on? Why can't I get my McFlurry?
Yeah. Everyone's a fan of McFlurry. I mean, I like the caramel one. The McFlurry, more of the sundae with the nuts. Mm-hmm. Pretty tasty.
I like the Oreo McFlurry is my go-to.
I can see that. It's powerful. Powerful stuff.
Yeah.
And, the thing about this is, like, first of all, it's actually kind of neat. I mean, is it a bit frivolous among other things that could be taken care of or addressed? Of course. But this has been an ongoing problem to the point where it's become a joke on the internet. There are songs about ice cream machines not working and all these other things. And there's a certain irony to it because, Ray Kroc, being the person that took the great ideas that the originators of McDonald's put together along the lines of workflows that were efficient and were emulated by fast food restaurants throughout the world. He was able to bring them to scale. And the irony is that he kind of got his start selling milkshake machines. So this feels like, it just feels like this hurts his legacy a little bit. He's done a lot of really interesting things. He brought fast food and standardization, all the work he did, even just behind the selection of the potatoes for McDonald's and how that's changed like an entire economy over in Idaho is a big deal.
Right.
And now there's like this little bit of tarnish around ice cream machines, and it's ice cream machines.
It's the backbone of the McDonald's experience. In fact, if you ever watch that movie, The Founder, you need to have, the idea was a milkshake, French fries, and a hamburger. That was it. That's what they served.
And now I'm sure that anyone that's watching this right now is like, why are they talking about ice cream machines? And yeah, that's a good question to have. The thing about it is that there's a bit of a social engineering component from some things that have gone on in the past year that are interesting and worth mentioning. If you go onto YouTube, you can actually find videos of people dressing up as technicians, like, folks that would service these machines, and then just walking into a McDonald's and be like, hey, I'm here to fix your ice cream machine. Look, we all know they're going to be broken, right? So if someone walks in with the shirt and they got the name on it and the toolkit, you're probably not going to stop them, but you just let a random person behind the counter at a McDonald's, and who knows what that could lead to, other than maybe them actually fixing the ice cream machine, which several of them have actually done.
Yeah. It's a very serious. Yeah, I mean, we're going to get into that kind of social engineering kind of aspect of it in some of our later episodes of cybersecurity, about the social, about how kind of the classic clipboard ruse, where you carry a clipboard and you put the white jacket on, you're a doctor. You carry a clipboard, a tool belt, you're a repair person, and you get access. There's always like stories on the internet and just apocryphal stories of just people getting into places they have no right being, but no one challenges them.
How did I get into Valiant? I walked in with a keyboard one day and just sat down. All of a sudden, I was on payroll.
I was like, wait a second, who is this Matt Fox character?
Yeah. It's working. Let's just let him do it. It was like a reverse Milton.
I was gonna say it was like the opposite of Office Space. It's like, you know,
I
he even
the
got
red staple
cake.
for the red hat.
Where's the red stapler? So,
But you know, it's the security component to that is what makes it interesting and worth mentioning. And yeah, we're going to go into that in more detail in a future episode. But it also kind of touches upon the security and the overall operational health of environments and how they function.
Right.
And that's really what we are talking today. So now that I've had my my thoughts, Megan, please do go on.
Thank you. Also, thank you for just making me very hungry at the top of the live stream.
yes.
I really want a McDonald's like French fry right now. All right. So again, something we're all passionate about, designing healthy computing environments. So a lot more goes into this than I think the layperson may even realize. I think they think, oh, the computer just works, you get it started. So Justin, George, what is a computing environment?
That's a great question. The best way to think of it is a computer environment is a space dedicated or built for optimizing and protecting computer resources, right?
Mhm.
You always think of like this giant data center kind of the vibe, which we're going to get into a little bit, but I think it's really important to describe like where actual data lives in this kind of current iteration of computing. But the cloud, which is other people's computer. But I think it's the idea here is that, you know, you think of like the server room or the network closet, or if you want to get fancy, you might call it the IDF or the MDF, and people start using these other terms there, but really it's just the space in an office or in an environment for the computers to operate, and it's optimized for them versus being optimized for humans, because computers like different things than people do. I assure you.
Yeah.
As someone who's worked in various places in computer rooms, server rooms, and data centers, they're not comfortable for us. I assure you.
I'm just going to bring it. I'm going to bring it back to McDonald's just 1 second, because you brought back a memory. I used to have 2 cabinets in a data center in New York, and there was one late night where I walked in like 2 a.m. to do some work, and there was a McDonald's chocolate milkshake on the floor next to my cabinet. Just bring it a full circle. I'm done.
Yes. Yeah. You should. We'll get to not eating in the server room as being one of the probably number top 3 things not to do in a server room, but we'll get there in a second. So, but they're really important. These computer room spaces, a lot of times when with our practice, people move offices, they change locations, they want us, and a lot of folks kind of under spec the server room, or there's not a lot of thought or planning goes into it. So now we're kind of like backpedaling and trying to like fit it in after the fact, when I think the best environments are really thought out early on. And we've done some really great projects around this recently with some of our great customers, and it really makes a difference of if it's not a afterthought.
Yeah, I can tell you great. Actually, this morning got a message from a client whose server room we're building out, and they said, "Hey, we're getting carpet in the office. Should that go into the server room as well too?" And the answer is no, because you don't want carpet for static and mess and various reasons. But even that, like you're saying, carpet is makes the rest of the office really nice, but the computing area, don't want that. Needs to be built differently.
What the computers want and what we want are very different.
I think that having a little bit of a comparison, not comparison, but I have another anecdotal story. I've got plenty of those for today. But they're having a properly designed and healthy computing environment is important. I was once asked to go visit a pet grooming service in the city and see what was going on with them, because they had this old Avaya IP office system that kept rebooting itself, and they were just saying, our tech's not really well taken care of. Can you just come in and look at it? And they walked me through the facility, and they had like the dog grooming things. It was actually really, really nice and clean. But when you got into the computer room, it was a different story. Everything was covered in pet hair and dander and dust and all the little bits of stuff that you wouldn't want to have. And Megan, we lost your camera.
Yeah, I'll fix it. You keep telling the story.
Awesome. And I walk into the room, and there's just this smell of burning hair. Like, it's gross when you walk in there. Like, you feel like you're going to have to take a shower when you leave the place. And I get to the back of an old Dell server, and I see that there's just like dust and everything collected on the back where the fans are. Everyone sees those, even in their homes. You wipe down the back of the computer every once in a while. And as I was pulling it away, it was like an inch thick. it looked like the stuff that would be underneath a carpet, like the padding. And it was just like, whoa, this is bad, guys. And I'm slowly pulling it off this machine, which was powered down. And the owner decided to do the same thing to a machine that was powered on, and that ignited, and it hit my pant leg, and I ended up running down 14th Street with like embers coming off of my pants, and everyone just looking at like, they just look at me like, oh, there goes Matt.
Did the dogs run after you too?
Exactly.
They were excited.
It was after
Matt.
Wow, you know what? You're right. It could have gotten much, much worse. But I mean, that's a bit of an extreme situation there with like, my pant leg catching fire. But those are the things that can happen in an environment that is not cared for.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. I mean, you always have to be there's so many pieces to it. So I think maybe we'll jump right in and start talking about the next piece, like the kind of building blocks of a server room.
What are the considerations? What do you have to keep in mind when designing one? And what do you have to look at when you're in one that something is just not right?
My question is, when can I eat my cereal in it? Like, is that
Never.
Never. No. I'm gonna go no. Never. Never.
I will go so far as to say, if you have food or drink at your desk, you should make sure, if you have a laptop, you should make sure that it's elevated so that if you spill something, it doesn't spill up and your laptop is safe. So
I do that, just so you guys know.
Food and drink and server room do not mix.
Right.
So we'll get there in a second, but I think let's just start with the really most basic of basic things: temperature. It's the one that I think most people designing spaces, particularly non-technical folks, kind of underplay. They're like, oh, you know what we'll do? We'll throw a little grate on this door, and it's going to totally solve the problem for temperature. No. And but let's explain why that's not a good idea and why temperature plays such an important part. So
firstly, you do want to keep a good temperature in the server room, in the network area. Generally, really, this is one where what's comfortable for us and what's comfortable for the machines are similar. 68, 75 degrees room temperature is ideal. And if the temperature raises, the operating temperature of a lot of modern equipment is higher than that. I mean, you can see rooms that are as high as 90 or even into 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and still the equipment is operating, but keeping it at that lower temperature, you do get a longer life out of it because you're not stressing it as much.
Correct.
The danger if temperature goes too high, and because the cooling in these systems are all just about airflow, fans and airflow, and moving over the processors and the hot components. And if those components themselves get too hot, the systems are designed to usually shut themselves down before they have too much permanent damage, but you are still risking damage to those systems and shortening their lifespan overall. And this is not just servers, this is same for switches, for UPSs, for anything. Because if you think about it, they're all generating heat, and that heat is detrimental to the way that they operate, and the longer that they're kept hot, the less lifespan they're going to have overall.
Well, it's just like thinking of doing work in a hot environment as a person. You can only sustain it for so long before you start to have trouble. You become dehydrated, you don't function. Now, of course, hydration and computers are completely different things, but the fact is that it's just not operating in an environment that's conducive to any kind of healthy activity, and ultimately that's going to lead to a very negative situation.
Right. The other end of the spectrum, though, you want to make sure that you don't cool it too much. If it's too cold, now the systems, the computers aren't necessarily going to get a chill, but you do run the risk of the air not being able to hold as much liquid and getting condensation. You do risk more of a buildup of static electricity, and the combination of static electricity and condensation is really detrimental to electronics, because one little bit in just the wrong spot and something can short out.
Exactly.
So it's good to keep that temperature within that sort of room temperature feel.
Right. And I think it's important. The other part that I think is critical is that the humidity actually has an impact on this. Too much humidity, once again, you kind of go into the condensation side of it, and it's slowly like will put corrode connectors, corrode circuit boards, and make it. And once again, our goal here is to extend the life and uptime of this piece of equipment. So this investment in the environment can take what might be a 4-year lifespan and extend it to 5. And it's not like one of those. It's not necessarily 100% quantifiable, but you could really start putting some numbers to this, because if you start looking at clean energy, and we'll get to energy in a second, but clean power and clean and proper temperature does extend the life and does not let the entropy break in. The other piece is the humidity is too low, which I think is actually worse than too high, because once again, it goes back to that cold where there's too much static electricity. There's nothing scarier than when you go walk into a server room and you feel that zap, and you're like, oh man. You should always discharge yourself before you touch any piece of equipment. There is a whole process for discharging yourself if you're doing, especially working on components, if you're opening something up. If you go to a server, if you ever go to a more robust data center environment, there's a lot of controls for temperature, humidity, and it's really important that this becomes something to be thoughtful, at least early on in the process. So, yeah. And also, let's go back to that thermal shutdown thing. Could cause all sorts of problems because thermal shutdowns are uncontrolled shutdowns.
You damage your registry. You're not booting up again without repair. There are so many little things that can take place in that short amount of time when that shutdown happens.
And another piece is to keep in mind, and this goes back to our next topic about airflow. With virtualized computing, you're taking smaller and smaller form factors of equipment and concentrating that much more heat and energy into a smaller space, right? So when you walk past a server nowadays, it's blasting out way more heat. It's using way more electricity, and that impacts it a lot. So now think about a thermal shutdown of a server, of a virtualized server that's hosting 6 servers. Now you have 6 potential failure points, not for the actual VM, plus on top of that, the actual hardware. And the amount of services impacted are so much greater now than the past. It was like one server shut down. Okay, we maybe have the file server for an afternoon. Now it's nothing works at all. Or you're trying to scramble back to backups. So
and again, not just servers. It's important to think switches, firewalls, network equipment as well.
Infrastructure, period. If it's a physical device in that room, you have to consider it.
Because even if the server, let's say, is running fine and running happy, but you have a switch higher in the rack, and again, going into airflow, it's in a spot where it's not getting proper airflow, proper cooling, and that switch dies. Now, it doesn't matter that your server's online. Nobody can access it. It needs the network. But yeah, that airflow, I think, goes hand in hand with temperature, but in some ways is more, I would say, is more important, because the way that the way that these systems, electronic systems, actively cool themselves is through airflow. They have a fan. Some are designed fanless, but for the most part, there's a fan that runs over what's called the heat sink, which is just a block of metal designed to have lots of surface area, and the heat
like a radiator, basically.
Yeah, and that's in physical contact with the hot part, which is usually a processor. And the idea is that by pulling air that is cooler than the processor over the heatsink, the processor is going to cool. And if that air itself is, at 70 degrees, even if that's not an air conditioner, if it's just ambient 70 degrees in your building, in the office, in the, from the weather like today, just having airflow over the equipment is enough to keep it cool. It doesn't need to be actively cooled at that point. It's just the air temperature is low enough that will help. It's that fresh air cooling. That'll keep that equipment cool.
As long as you have clean air coming into the space and a return for air, that way you're not recycling the same air, which will eventually heat up over time.
Exactly.
You are in a good place. And you're right. If you remember, like the earlier gen, or maybe even now, I'm just out of touch with it, but the Hewlett-Packard Reliance used to have like an entire bay towards the back of the server. It was like 8 or 10 fans, and they'd all spin up at the same time, and they would spin at full speed as soon as you turn the machine on. It sounded like a jet engine, and then eventually it would adjust when the temperature sensors kicked in, and was able to adjust the RPMs down so that they weren't like blasting your ears out. And you knew that there was something wrong with one of those machines if they sounded like a jet engine 24/7. Something was going to fail.
There's probably no more like poop moment is when you open the server room door and you hear every single fan on every single device screaming at full RPM, and that something's wrong. Be it like it's almost always because the cooling either failed, or the cooling or the airflow, or something like that. And I think and obviously being in New York, or in an environment, especially office office environments, there's not a lot of fresh air coming into a server room. We know you're not, it's very difficult to pipe fresh air in an office tower or that kind of facility. So, generally we rely on air conditioning to cool it, right? And air conditioning has multiple values because it also reduces the amount of moisture in the air. Generally speaking, here in the Northeast, our air is generally more moist until wintertime. And even then, we have days of snow. And so you really want to control the environment and normalize it.
And the selection of air conditioners, and I'll keep this quick because I want to make sure that we get through today's stream on time. Air conditioning is important. You've got different options that you can use. There are the split duct air conditioners, which are great because you don't have too much that needs to be built into your walls or anything like that. It's more just about the cooling lines. They also have the Move and Cool brand is the one that comes to mind. The stationary kind of like the portable units that look like big washing machines, and they're great to have. And I always suggest that people have both if possible, because if you have like a split duct system, the compressor is going to be outside someplace. And if you're in a busy area, particularly New York City, those get clogged very quickly and they fail. And there's nothing worse than thinking that you have an air conditioner that's running 24/7 and then you start getting those alerts. So it's good to have the backup and let it run at the same time to supplement. And especially in New York City, this is a big deal. I used to have to come into work on New Year's Day to take care of the AC units in Times Square for a building I worked in because it was covered in confetti. If I wasn't there on New Year's Day to clean them off and just kind of like tidy things up, you come back on the second and all of a sudden you're having to replace like your condenser coil because the thing burnt out because of everything getting sucked in from the partying. So it is important to consider your external environment and how that has an impact on your computing environment.
I can say many a Saturday in my life has been ruined because people didn't spend a couple $100 to do the maintenance on an air conditioning unit. And that one particularly comes into my mind where a customer decided that that $300 for someone to come clean the coils and change the filters we don't really need that this year.
Yeah, then you got to replace the $12,000 machine after that.
Well, it was like, now you like have to prop the door open and have fans and this kind of jury-rigged cooling solution. And, luckily, and this is a kind of a segue into our next thing is you have sensors in the space, right? Like, there's always that, like, in years past before these sensors were very available, a lot of times you get a phone call on like, hey, I was in the office and there's a lot of noise coming from the server room. You're like, oh no, that's bad. So, our goal is never to be surprised like that or have that kind of report. So we install a number of sensors in most of our computing environments to maintain at least
stay within tolerances.
Tolerance, right? Thank you. For temperature, I know if something does go over, we'll obviously either talk to the building or talk to some of the folks over there, and even dispatch our team over there to take a look what's going on. Because and there's definitely different sensors. There's a there's humidity, there's a water sensor that I think is critical after today. We'll get to water in a second, but water's really so. These environmental sensors really matter. They, some of them are attached to UPSs, which are UPS is an uninterruptible power supply. It's basically a battery that smooths the power out for a computing environment. But we like also some other ones that are standalone that you can move around the server room. A lot of times, the ones in the UPSs are kind of strung or kind of limited to how far the cable to the UPS can be placed, whereas you might make one or more sensors based on the environment because there's different ambient temperatures in different parts of the room. Another thing that I would also recommend, they're really low cost nowadays and they can be really helpful when doing a room, is infrared camera or an infrared gun. Like a thermometer that you can just look around the room and see there's hot spots. When we go to our section on our data centers, we'll talk about that's a task for the data center guy to go in the data center and take the thermometer and start scanning all the different pieces of the data center.
That's a critical role, and you would see people walking through the cold and hot aisles of a data center doing that. And again, back when my day in Globix, when I had the cabinets there, I'd always go and do the Hot Pockets jingle whenever the guy would go by. I'm off the rails today. We need to continue on.
I know. We keep moving along.
Let's quickly talk about the water sensor, though, because temperature and humidity make good sense. We've already talked about the reasons for that, but what kind of scenario would lead to the necessity of a water sensor?
Oh
I
man.
mean, it might rain more than it's ever rained in Central Park twice in 2 weeks,
2 weeks,
and
yeah.
that might cause some flooding.
Yeah,
But that would be crazy.
I mean,
Yeah.
unheard of,
Yeah.
unprecedented.
There's definitely a definitely a need to make sure. I mean, water and electronics do not mix unless they're specifically designed to be in the water. Otherwise, yeah, you really do want to know if you have a. Again, if you're in a high-rise building on, or even several floors up, and that's where your server equipment is, it may. I mean, there still are
Pipes
possibly
above you.
pipes and
I was going to
things
say
along those lines that you need to consider.
Yeah.
We've actually had that. We had a client who's they're I think on the 6th or 8th floor, and their server room was under a pipe, and that pipe at one point started leaking, and they just put up a tarp. It's like, that's not really a solution. You've got water leaking out of something on top of the equipment that you're running your entire business on. We need to, this needs to be resolved before something happens. And in that case, it wasn't a sensor. It was somebody else. Somebody was in the room and saw it. But having something that can detect water on the floor or water around, just as an early warning system,
Yeah.
is really powerful, especially if you do have your server equipment in a basement, in some place that is prone to some kind of flooding. Knowing that there is moisture on the floor and getting to a place where you can shut everything down and move it away from that before that water gets into that equipment, that can save lots of downtime, lots of money.
I tell you another classic flooding scenario. A lot of times, depending on the size of the server room, there might be a condensate pump for the air conditioner.
Oh yeah.
And if you've ever seen a condensate pump, it's a little box like this.
And they love to fail.
And they fail.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pump. It's doing pump things, and it's pumping. And they're small electromechanical devices, and they tend to have, once again, these things have many year service lives. And they don't fail all that often, but it is a failure point. And knowing that even if that first touch of water on the ground could be the thing that between a inconvenient time of just like, oh, something's wrong in there, I'm gonna go check it out or figure out what's going on there, versus like a catastrophe.
Right.
And now you're activating business continuity plans, you're filing insurance, you're just disrupting your entire operation. And and once again, we've gotten so used to things not being disrupted because of cloud and other things. This literally grinds everything to a halt because it could be a network closet or a network space.
Yeah.
So
I think the liquid, and that falls into the larger category overall of just the physical hygiene of the space. And like Matt was saying before, with that dust buildup, electronic equipment generates some level of static, which actively attracts dust that's in the air. That's why computers are, even home electronics.
They're the same thing as the ionic air cleanser.
Exactly.
At the end of the day.
The dust will stick to these things,
Right,
so it is important to clean them out. And the compressed air and things like that are good for getting it out of equipment. But if you don't have a filtration system there, all you're doing is kicking that stuff back up, and it's just going to land back down. So
it's a kid moving the food around on their plate because they don't want to eat it, and you have to clear the thing off. That's all.
You want to get static-free wipes to wipe things down. You want to use you can use a vacuum. However, you do need to make sure it is an electronics vacuum. They're specifically built to not generate static.
Don't take your vacuum.
And just really quickly, let's just throw out there that a lot of standard vacuums, especially ones that are used by buildings, which sometimes you may want to borrow to do some cleanup, have that lovely bar that's a magnet in the front to pick up paper clips. You don't want that in your equipment either.
Yes, right. That's right.
A good point.
And it's actually really interesting when you go to a server room that's segmented or a computing environment that has proper air conditioning, kind of a closed off door. The amount of dirt and dust in the computer or the servers is so vastly different than one that is in an uncontrolled environment. I mean, Justin, I know Matt, over the years, I mean, I can tell you how many times we've crawled around server rooms or taking things out of a rack, and your hands are black. The computer's filthy.
Let's keep it real. How many of us have been in a computer room servicing something and have involuntarily heaved at what you see?
ingested a giant dust ball. As you start disturbing it, you look at the corners of the room, you're like,
and
oh
then
my
your
God.
mouth gets dry. You gotta get water. You're bringing more issues into the computer room. It's ridiculous. But
Exactly.
at the end of the day, and I think the most important thing is no food or drink.
Yeah,
It's been a problem that I have faced many times. I answered to CIO once who decided that he wanted to eat his miso soup every time he got Japanese food in front of the servers, and he had a hiccup and he had an incident, and it was completely avoidable. And it was actually kind of funny when it happened, I'll admit. But it wasn't a very good thing. And I think we need to get a fan on Megan's camera today. I think we're having a temperature issue with that thing.
I actually wanted to say, I when I was 20, this is a horrific story, but I did accidentally spill milk in someone's computer. And, I've learned a lot. I'm reformed now. But we had to go to Best Buy. We had to see what we could save. I bought my friend a new computer. I did all my due diligence. But, that was me paying for a very simple mistake. Keep the food away.
Yeah,
And
we see that in laptops and workstations. I mean, it happens, something spills on it. And it's one thing if it's on a laptop, but because, that's affecting that one machine. And like you said, you could get your friend a new laptop. But if you're taking down, like all of the server equipment because,
all Hacker Man needs is a juice box and he can take you down.
I mean, I worked in an environment that had a giant UPS in the middle of the room that literally became this like magnet for sodas. Because at the end of the hall, there was a refrigerator that had free sodas. It was an ad agency, and that was kind of the perk of the job, was you have free sodas. So people would walk, grab a soda, go to the server room, badge in, go in the server room, start working. And I remember like you'd be working and you see the can of like 2 cans of half-drunk Cokes. and I worked with another engineer, and he loses his mind. There was like giant signs on this thing like no drinks allowed, and he was like, he would check the camera, who put stuff, who drank it. I'm gonna admit I was guilty. I might have drank a Coke once or 10 times in there. Was it changing? I don't know if you guys ever changed the tapes on a robot. It's a couple. It's like an hour.
It's a task.
So it's a task. It's like, and it's cold, and you're like, man, I just want a drink or a cup of coffee. It's kind of cold in here. And also the kitchen noise right there. So but it's a real problem because this thing had giant lead acid car batteries in it that was run, and if you just spilled a cup of coffee in there full of like coffee and milk, it would have. I mean, I don't want to think about it. So then everyone got really serious about not doing that anymore. But it took a couple of like I would say near misses, but like a fear, like the scary. It's funny. I haven't thought about that room in years, and I can see it in my mind. Like,
we're all walking away from
like right in the middle.
We're all walking away from today's episode, just shaking a little bit from past memories.
Yes.
But let's keep things going.
So I think the UPS that you're bringing up too is good for the next thing that you want to take into consideration, which is the infrastructure within the building itself, and probably the biggest for that is the electricity. UPSs are great. Both for conditioning the power that comes in and for protecting against blips. They're not really, most of them are not meant for keep things running for a long time with no power. It's meant to, if the power drops out, to keep things running for a few minutes, and then if it doesn't come back, to shut them down. But what you want to take into consideration, especially if you're building a new server room, is you do want to have at least one, but better to have 2 dedicated electric circuits in that space, because like Matt was saying, that someone's going to plug a vacuum in outside, to clean the floors. You don't want that to potentially cause a problem that shuts down power that then affects the server room.
And you never want to have a microwave and a toaster in a computer room as well, because as soon as you start using both of them, it's just game over.
Go. And having the 2 separate circuits allows you to then have 2 separate UPSs, so that even if something happens and brings a whole circuit down, you can still keep things powering on a redundant power supply.
Exactly. I mean, obviously, if you're designing a big data center, there's a lot more considerations of like multi-pathing and different service providers and egress ingress of the building. But we're talking about literally small 2 separate circuits, small business, 2 separate based on the size. And one thing that's really important, I think that a lot of folks don't necessarily do super well, and it definitely was something we think is really important. Do an electrical service plan before you build a server room. Kind of anticipate what you're going to put in there. Obviously, server rooms that are built 10 years ago tend to have more power and cooling than they do more of a modern kind of take on it. But obviously, with a lot of changes with edge computing, we might be going back to that. Who knows where things take. So
you're bringing something that's really important that we could have mentioned earlier, but we didn't really want to go too technical into this. I mean, even we're scratching the surface today and we're taking forever. But if you are planning a room, you should be considering your power, and you should also be considering the heat output. Measure your BTUs, figure out how much energy it's going to take to keep that room in the right temperature. That's going to help dictate a lot of the other decisions that are being made. But yeah, it's the whole infrastructure thing's always been a bit of an issue. I mean, you do have the power, and I'm just going to throw in there that I personally, as a pet peeve, insist on seeing at least one 208 volt outlet in a room, because some of the larger equipment's going to need that. Sometimes UPSs, sometimes the big air conditioners. But yeah, make sure you have at least 20 amp circuits. Make sure you're able to pull the power that you need. There's nothing worse than seeing like a 10 or a 15 and you pop 2 servers in, you boot them up, and everything shuts down. And that I've dealt with that many times before. And also plumbing. Plumbing is the big.
Yes, I was going to say this next point is pertinent because of what happened to our client.
We've all seen it. I've had problems with plumbing. Leaky pipes. I think we talked about a couple months ago over a server cabinet, and that's just a nightmare. That's the kind of thing like you wake up in a cold sweat from, and you all of a sudden you're like, sweat. What? Oh my god! And everything gets a little crazy. But that's important. So when building a room or even just evaluating it, and if you have a drop ceiling, push the thing out of the way. Get the full view of that room, the true ceiling, the true floor, the walls. Don't let the decor or anything that's for the aesthetics of the room to influence a decision because you may be making a big mistake.
Do you want to leave the drop ceiling up if there is one there?
Push it out of the way to look.
You want to look. You want to document it. You want to have an understanding of what's in that room.
I didn't mean like full on Bob tear down. No.
Yeah. The only reason I said leave it up there is that it controls dust. You want to control, and once again, we want to control the dust in the environment because one thing we did talk about was the hygiene in the room. Not only on the computers, but the actual room itself should be kept as clean as possible.
Absolutely.
Just because it accumulates over time, and these are 24/7 environments. Even if you're not a 24/7 office per se, the room is, the space is.
Yes.
It doesn't have to run all day, every day, 365.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely.
So just for the last point, just because we, again, these conversations are always so interesting. I want to move on to the physical access and security considerations. Like once we've taken care of all of this, we have to think about physical access. And it's easy to concentrate on limiting access to network resources and forget how easy it can be just to simply walk up to servers and equipment. We need, you need personnel in there that knows what they're doing. And we were kind of having fun discussing this earlier, but it's like, anyone can maybe like the McFlurry thing. Like if someone wants to go and pretend to fix a McFlurry, the white coat thing, if someone throws on a white coat, they can get maybe further in a hospital than they should. You need fail safes for that. You can't just let someone confidently walk into your server.
At the very least, you should have your equipment in a rack or a cabinet that you can lock. Even if it has to be in an area that has other things in it or has people going through, locking that just something simple. It's certainly not foolproof, but it is something. It's better than nothing.
It's really important. I think the maximum is if I can touch it, I own it. Because once let's say, if you're not carefully monitoring things, you see a server reboots, that reboot might have been someone plugging something in and doing something. You just don't know for sure. And the physical security is actually, it's almost universally overlooked in many environments, especially small business. It's a bunch of switches in a computer. Why do we need to protect it? But that's a lot of that. It's just access to your systems. It's access to your data. And, deeper than that, you really want to know who is access to it, because people might inadvertently go into a server room or a network closet and do something. I mean, Matt and I were talking about this earlier.
Yeah, it happens. I have another quick, today's the anecdote episode, but this is good. And we'll get into more detail on this in a future episode as we cover cybersecurity in depth next month. So let's get that out of the way first. But, there was one job that I had in the mid 2000s, and I had a great computer, super big, perfect flooring. I mean, everything that we talked about right now was in place. It was my baby. It was gorgeous. And I had a couple of people on my team, and I had a team member who would come in and, work and then, change into something else to go out with friends at night. The office was in the middle of Times Square, so there was always something going on. And they had a tendency to do this, and I didn't really like it, but I didn't mind it because my office was directly across from the computer room. So if something was going on, I would know right away. But one time they decided to turn the AC off because it was a little bit too cold in there for them. Too cold in there for their own tastes. Wow, short-circuited for a second. Just too much humidity. And they turned the AC unit off. And then about 20 minutes later, I'm sitting at my desk typing an email, and I hear the fans start getting louder,
Right.
and louder, and just have that moment. And I walk across the hall, I open the door, and I get hit with the hot air. It was like 102 degrees in the room, and it was only off for like 25 minutes or something like that. Yeah. And that's the kind of wake up call for having more physical security. Now, the room was under lock and key. All of my cabinets had locks, but that didn't mean that if someone got in there, they couldn't, inadvertently cause a little bit of a disaster.
Someone who just doesn't understand.
Exactly. And it wasn't even understanding. It was just overlooking as from rushing. And what I ended up doing was buying a really inexpensive camera that would just take a photo whenever there was motion. And it wasn't so much me wanting to point my finger at anyone. It was just, hey guys, you're on notice. The room is being monitored, and there's evidence. It's not going to be like, who did this? I don't know. And everyone walks away. Hey, you know what? We actually have a hello from Michael. Hey, Michael. Got some visitors. Hey, guy.
Hello.
Hi, Michael. And Matt, thank you so much for that anecdote. I think that's such a clear image of just like, it's not like there are all these bad actors waiting to go and mess with our stuff.
We all have things that we need to do during the workday. Sometimes we make a mistake. Sometimes we forget something. And it happens, but you want to make sure that you have considerations that take care of the needs of the environment, power wise, hygiene wise, and also just get some measures in there to help mitigate any kind of problems that could happen. If that happened on the weekend and I'm an hour and a half away from the office, it would have been a very, very different outcome.
Right. I'm sorry. I was just going to go on to our final segment and kind of wrap everything up because we are 11 minutes past. Make a wish. It's 11:11. So we've spent today's episode covering the broad considerations of having a healthy computing environment. And we've shared stories to illustrate that these things happen. So this is just another big consideration for the health of your network and the health of your machines. And again, please reach out to us if you have any questions, if you're worried about the state of your technology. And we sort of boiled this down to 3 points. If you take anything away from today's stream, computing environments must be maintained. None of it is set it and forget it. As much as you want it to be, it's not. And the time required for maintenance is nothing. And this is what we stress with everything we do, but it's nothing compared to the time and resources needed to remedy these problems when they do occur. So just make the plan, put it in place, and
call us, email us, add us on LinkedIn, Facebook.
Before anything goes
wrong. Is a pound of cure. Yeah,
have someone check in on it. And third, and this is again across the board for a lot of cybersecurity, anything when it comes to your computers, none of this is a one-time task. Maintenance is an ongoing need, and it can easily be forgotten in favor of other business needs, which is also why call us, because we take care of this for you. You can't forget about it. It's the foundation of almost everything. Your computing is the foundation of almost everything in modern business. So I hope that wraps it up pretty well, you guys. If you feel any extra things you want to say, let me know.
I think we covered all the bases today. It was a lot. Was.
Matt, go.
No, I was gonna say it was a lot, but it was also really fun to have these kinds of conversations in a way that I think can help some folks and maybe get some more ideas going. And I was gonna say let's go ahead and preview what's next week, because it's along the same lines, but a completely different point of view.
Yeah, it's technology's impact on the environment, which, I mean, just given everything that's happened in the news, everything that's happened, I think this is a really pertinent topic. Not that technology is causing everything, but sort of our angle on the environment. And so we spent today covering healthy computing environments and how they integrate in the success of business of all sizes. We're going to talk about how technology impacts the environment. And for better and worse, we know that there are two sides of this, and what we can do to preserve the environment. That's really important to us.
And just before we go, we got another comment because we're getting in some interactions today. Same, Michael. So let me get this up really quickly, and then we're going to head out. Whenever I have to troubleshoot a laptop, I've made a habit to apply new thermal paste and clean the fan.
Yeah,
I
that's
can tell you,
great.
Yeah.
the fan is a huge deal. I mean, I think that a lot of machines, as they get smaller and smaller, even the ports are getting smaller. Airflow is not the same. Airflow is it's quite frankly, it's probably building up more pressure inside of the machine, and that's probably going to lead to other problems as well. So I got to say, that's an awesome thing. It's commendable to know that those types of steps are being taken when a machine is being serviced, because you're not just taking care of the immediate problem, but you're taking care of a lot of potential things there too.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Well, thank you all for tuning in. George, Justin, Matt, thank you guys for being here. Again, fun is not the issue, and how much we love to talk to each other is not the issue. If you enjoyed today's stream, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe. That would be wonderful. And again, if you have any comments or questions, just type them in the YouTube channel. We really love interacting with people watching these streams. And be sure to visit us at the Valiant Way and learn more about our services. And please tune in next week. It'll be even more fun. It always gets more
It'll
fun.
be great.
Always
It'll be
great fun. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Great week.
Bye,
Stay
guys.
safe.
Bye-bye.